Sarah, and I'll talk a little bit more about where I'm from in just a moment, but I'm originally from Beaufort, South Carolina. Naneye gun sawo sawo asasiaye gun sawo sawo Naneye gun sawo aye Naneye gun sawo sawo Naneya moye gun sawo sawo Naneye gun sawo aye. So I learned that song from a Jamaican choreographer. I took an African dance drumming workshop last summer. And this gentleman has traveled all over the country, all over the world, from the West Indies, been all over Africa. And he cried in Charleston when he taught us this song. This is a song that is sung to welcome and invite the ancestors into whatever place that you're in. And he said that he felt their presence very strongly in Charleston, even in comparison to all of the various places that he visited. And that was shortly after the church massacre last year, so there was a lot of different energy. But the piece that I bring to this day in the work that I do at McCall Plantation Historic Site with Miss Christine is the Gullah culture. So I like to educate and help people understand the origins, the foundation of what Gullah Geechee is and who these people are, and really based on the geography of the island or the geography of the plantation where they are, the conditions of slavery, and most importantly, the resiliency of the enslaved people. So this means the memories, the crafts, the skills that the enslaved people brought with them, how all these factors came together to form a culture that is still present today. So I want to see a show of hands for any of you who have heard the words Gullah and or Geechee before today. Which is a pretty good mix. Okay, I give the same explanation whether you heard about it or not. So we all know who and what we're talking about when I say the words Gullah, G-U-L-L-A-H, and Geechee, G-E-E-C-H-E-E. These two words are synonymous. And together, Gullah Geechee represents a group of people. Gullah Geechee represents a culture, a specific language, specific foods and arts. Gullah Geechee also represents resistance, resourcefulness, innovation, and survival. And Gullah Geechee does represent me as well. So I am a 6th generation Gullah woman. As I said, I'm originally from Beaufort, South Carolina. It's about an hour and a half, hour 15 minutes south of here. And my father and grandmother were born and raised on St. Helena Island, which is a very prominent sea island in Beaufort County. And Gullah Geechee as a group of people, we are the descendants of enslaved West Africans who were brought to the present-day coast of North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida during the 16, 17, and 1800s. And these West Africans were brought here to this coast, this region, specifically for their vast knowledge and expertise in rice production. Rice cultivation. Well, it was not random, it was not arbitrary. When it was recognized that the Carolina colonies were similar in climate to the tropical climates of West Africa, and that rice would grow well here in these wetlands, the planters and colonists sought after skilled West Africans from what was known as the grain coast, or the rice coast of West Africa, where they had been growing rice for thousands of years prior. And it is indicative by bills of sale and advertisements and letters, like Miss Christine read, that it was likely for plantation owners to pay higher prices for West Africans coming from these rice-growing countries for the skills that they possess. So they're being brought from countries like Ghana, Sierra Leone, Senegal, Liberia, the Ivory Coast, Gambia, Guinea, Angola, Nigeria. They're coming in numbers of hundreds and thousands. And you can imagine, of course, because all of these enslaved people are coming from various different West African countries, they all speak various different West African languages, right? Because we know there is no universal African that they all speak. So the enslaved people cannot communicate with one another, let alone communicate with the plantation owners, the colonists. So Gullah Geechee as a language is a Creole language. And for many of us, when we hear Creole, we automatically think Louisiana or New Orleans or Beyonce. But all the Creole language is a blending of linguistic influences. So in the case of the colonization or slavery, when you have a group of people with diverse languages and backgrounds, often a Creole language is formed. The Creole spoken in New Orleans is a Creole language. Jamaican patois is a Creole language. Gullah Geechee is a Creole language existing with hundreds of different African dialects, African rules of language with the base language of English.
So there are various African words that each and all of us use pretty regularly without knowing that they're African in origin. But for many Gullah Geechee speakers, the Africanisms of our heritage sometimes influence the ways that we pronounce English words. For example, words like this and that and there. You might hear a Gullah Geechee person say this or that or dare. And this is because originally these West Africans would not have been pronouncing the TH sound. That was not a part of their phonetics. Words like strawberry and street by some of my peers and family members is pronounced strawberry, and street, even if they read the word written out, they will pronounce it that way. You might hear everything sound like everything. You might hear three pronounced shriek. As I said, there are a lot of African words that all of us use. Words like tote, to carry. Some of you ladies have tote bags. You tote a basket. You tote a baby. Tote is West African. Coota, C-O-O-T-A, is the West African and Gullah word for turtle. I don't know if I have any Southerners here who may have heard cooter, C-O-O-T-E-R. This is a Southern adaptation of the African word for turtle, Coota. Also, Nana, N-A-N-A, is of the Twi dialect. Ashanti people of Ghana. Nana means elderly woman or grandmother. So usually in every space that I present, I have a Nana or someone who has a Nana or someone who knows a Nana. So most of us can relate to this African word that is used very regularly. For many, many years, the Gullah Geechee people were ashamed of their culture and language. My dad tells me growing up on St. Helena Island, you did not want to be called either Gullah or Geechee. These were fighting words. And basically they meant you talk funny. You are different. You are country. For outsiders who heard the language spoken, they said it was broken substandard English. It was ghetto, slang. The speakers were inferior. That is why they spoke this way, and it wasn't recognized that Gullah was its own language, based on African rules of language. It was not English at all. I like to tell a story about my grandmother. Her name is Kathleen Days. She passed away last year in August. She lived to be 101 years old. For a really long time, my grandma was the oldest living graduate of Penn School. And Penn Normal Institute was founded in 1862 as part of the Port Royal experiment to educate free people of color on St. Helena Island. My grandma graduated class of 1933. So she was of this generation of people where the Gullah language was taught out of their speech. If you can imagine, all the educators and missionaries and abolitionists from the North and the South seemingly had the best intentions to educate and empower the new freed people, but they were attempting to suppress any and all of the Africanisms that were left. So the language had to go. My grandma was raised that way, and she in turn raised my father and his 8 siblings that way. So they were not allowed to speak Gullah in the house. But what we did recognize, and what I will share with y'all, is that from about age 97 to 101, my grandmother spoke fluent Gullah again. So the older she got, the more Gullah she spoke, and we really enjoyed hearing that. So I just appreciate this time, this opportunity to share with the other presenters here, because one of the main focuses for me at McLeod Plantation is humanizing their experience. It's very easy to look at this group of people or this demographic as slaves, and then separate your own feelings, your own personal feelings for how you would have experienced living this way, how you would have been able to survive, how you would have been able to move forward, how you would have been able to pass anything on to your children. That is why in my interpretation, I think most people out here, we use the term slave versus, or excuse me, we use the term enslaved versus slave. So the way I indicated is that the European slavers and traders didn't go to Africa and get slaves. You understand? They went and enslaved people. And that completely changes how you look at these people with families and culture and education and spirituality and what they were able to hone and create that is still present today. So the last point I'm going to bring up is just a little bit about the work. There were various reasons that Gullah Geechee people specifically were able to retain so much of their African culture. And one of those reasons was the labor system. Have any of you ever heard of gang labor or the gang system? So gang labor was usually on sugar and tobacco plantations. Gang labor is where they worked from sun up to sundown. Or in Gullah, this is said, from day clean to the sun be red for down. But here at Magnolia and throughout the Low Country, they operated under the task system, T-A-S-K. And a task represented a certain amount of work you were expected to accomplish in a day. Usually a task was 10 to 12 hours of work. In distance, a task was a half a quarter acre or 11,025 square feet. And every individual was assigned a task every morning. Man, woman, child. Children as early as 5 years old could be put to work. The task system finds its origins in rice production. So like I said, there were hundreds and thousands of West Africans who were brought here very specifically because they knew how to grow rice. It wasn't uncommon on some of the very large rice plantations to see the enslaved men and women, either the drivers or the overseers, teaching the planter, this is how rice is grown. This is the process. So it is said that the earliest West Africans brought here to do this work may have used their knowledge as leverage and influenced their work schedule so that it differed from the gang labor, sun up, sun down, perhaps communicating, this is what we can expect to accomplish in a day as it pertains to rice. And on McLeod plantations, where Christine and I work, they cultivated Sea Island cotton. So this was a completely different skill set. If you were brought here to grow rice and then you were sold to a plantation where rice is not grown, you have to learn something completely different. But there were various tasks that were assigned on the rice plantation, whether it was planting, harvesting, clearing these cypress swamps. You have this period of time during the spring where you have to drain and flood the fields. And if you can think of all the mosquitoes and the snakes and the crocodiles and whether they're insects that they are living with on a very regular basis. The task system was also very helpful because in the summer, some plantation owners, like the Draytons, would go to their summer houses to avoid the hottest months, to avoid the humidity and the mosquitoes, and under the task system, the same amount of work was expected to be completed in your absence. And once they completed this 10 to 12 hours of work, this very heavy work that they were doing, whether they were winnowing the rice, planting the rice, threshing the rice, harvesting provision crops, once you completed that, on these low country plantations, enslaved people were given some of their own time. And this is not to be misunderstood as free time. There was no free time. It's not like they got to clock out and float on a raft down the stream. Once you completed your tasks, then you would attempt to raise your family. So you're looking at some of these cabins right here. Enslaved people in the low country had small gardens behind their houses that they were expected to harvest and plant to feed their children. Once they completed their tasks, they might go out to the water and fish as a source of protein. If they were any skilled craftsmen, rebuilding the cabins, because they would have been building these themselves, building furniture, mending clothing, making baskets, not unlike the sweetgrass baskets that we see sold around town today. The task system also aided in the development of the underground slave economy, because sometimes with permission and sometimes without, the enslaved people would take what they grew or made on their own time and trade or barter or sell it with other enslaved people or townspeople in downtown Charleston. So all of the things that we imagine doing when we complete our jobs, where we clock out and get paid, the enslaved people were expected to do here. It was known as the second shift of work. And beyond the second shift, you have to imagine that they would have been teaching one another this new language as newcomers were sold to and arriving on the plantation, teaching them the ins and outs. What can we get away with? What can we absolutely not get away with? How are we going to get out of here? What plants and trees are growing around here can be eaten? What can be used for medicinal purposes? So there are a lot more that contributes to the Gullah culture as far as their spirituality, their language, the foodways that the South and Charleston is known for are all contributions of the Gullah Geechee people, but that's all I'm going to share in this shared 30 minutes that we have. So thank you very much for having me come out.